Don't judge a book by its cover, so the saying goes, and that applies quite often to bosses in video games as well. There's a number of examples of formidable enemies who, at least from a visual perspective, look absolutely menacing, hinting at a grueling encounter around the corner. But when you actually get down to fighting them, they turn out to be disappointing pushovers. Here, we're going to talk about a few such bosses. Before we go ahead, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos every single day, and your support really helps us out. With that out of the way, let's start. Dark Beast Ganon, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild, for all of its many strengths, is full of disappointing boss fights. The most disappointing of the lot is the very final encounter. The fight against Calamity Ganon is disappointingly easy as it is, but then you take on his second form, Dark Beast Ganon, which turns out to be even more of a cakewalk. Given how menacing the devilish creature looks, you wouldn't expect him to go down this easily. Eveline, Resident Evil 7.
You.
Why does everyone hate me?
There's quite a few solid boss fights in Resident Evil 7, but the final encounter against Eveline is definitely not one of them. On paper, it's hard to imagine how a fight against a massive creature that's larger than a house might be anything but excellent, but in reality, it's one of the least engaging final bosses in the entire series.
Use it!
You're just supposed to mindlessly unload all of your ammo into Eveline with little to no strategy involved, which feels like a real waste of potential. Two-Face, Batman Arkham Knight. Two-Face is one of the most iconic villains in Batman history, which makes his appearance in Arkham Knight that much more disappointing. Because really, he's not even a boss fight. Effectively, he's just an ordinary thug. There's no set-piece encounter here, no special strategy that you have to employ. You just take him out the way you would any ordinary thug. And that's it. Two-Face is captured and put behind bars. A massive letdown, to say the very least. Quiet, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Conceptually, the boss fight against Quiet is one of Metal Gear Solid 5's most interesting ones. But the actual encounter leaves a little something to be desired. The long-range sniper battle isn't nearly as challenging as you'd expect when facing off against someone as capable as Quiet. And of course, it doesn't help that you can end the fight in literally seconds by just dropping a crate right on top of her head. Human Reaper, Mass Effect 2.
These readings, it must be massive. Shepard, if my calculations are correct, the superstructure is a Reaper.
Not just any Reaper. Human Reaper.
In context of Mass Effect 2's story, which sees entire human colonies being abducted by the Collectors, the final boss being a twisted Human Reaper hybrid makes a lot of sense, and surely BioWare could have made an excellent boss fight out of it. Obviously, that didn't end up happening. There isn't anything particularly bad about the boss fight, it's just, well, kind of bland. It's not very challenging, it doesn't have a unique hook to it, and especially coming right off the back of the incredible suicide mission, it just feels like a rather tame way to end the game. Ceaseless Discharge, Dark Souls. Even From Software games, which essentially live and die by their boss fights, have a few disappointingly easy boss encounters every now and then. In the original Dark Souls, the hilariously named Ceaseless Discharge is one of them. Aggroing the boss from a distance and then running back to the fog gate is an easy way to cheese your way through the fight, as series fans discovered long ago. But even if you choose to get through the fight the normal way, it honestly doesn't pose too much of a challenge. The Storm King, Demon Souls. Speaking of relatively easy bosses in Souls games, the fight against the Storm King is by no means bad. Mechanically, it's one of Demon Souls' more interesting fights, and it's not exactly a cakewalk either. But going into it, it certainly gives the impression that it's going to be much more challenging than it turns out to be. It's all too easy to hide behind cover and avoid most, if not all, damage, to then peek out and deal some pretty devastating blows yourself. It's still a pretty good boss fight, just not as good as it should be. The Conjurer, Silent Hill 4: The Room. Boss fights and combat in general have never really been something that Silent Hill as a series has put an awful lot of emphasis on. Story and atmosphere are generally the most important things for the franchise. Even so, the final encounter against the Conjurer in Silent Hill 4: The Room is quite disappointing. In terms of visual design and atmosphere, the fight does deserve some praise, but there's little to no challenge involved, which definitely feels like a bit of a letdown. Supreme Hunter, Prototype. Supreme Hunter's appearance is the very definition of intimidating, and at first glance, you might think that the fight against him is going to push you to your limits. In reality, though, it's actually rather easy. It's not an absolute cakewalk, no, and you do still have to be careful about dodging his heavier attacks and remaining on the move, but the fight doesn't really do justice to how formidable the boss looks. To be fair, though, on the hard difficulty, the fight is significantly more challenging, so there is that. General Cross, Rage 2. Rage 2 is a deeply flawed game, and nothing exemplifies that better than its disappointing ending. More specifically, that joke of a boss fight against General Cross. He takes on the form of a gigantic titan, but it's just set dressing. He doesn't actually leverage that form in any meaningful way, and the fight itself barely poses any sort of challenge whatsoever. It's incredibly, shockingly bland, and sort of trivializes the entire game. Final boss, The Thing. This one basically shouldn't even be a boss fight. It's just in there because, well, we're not exactly sure why. You fly around the flailing tentacled creature in a chopper and unload bullets into it with a mounted machine gun, but the creature itself makes next to no attempts to fight back. Minimal interactivity and minimal challenge are a poor combination, and here they come together to make for a bland, forgettable boss fight. Divine Dragon, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice is the flag bearer for games with challenging and satisfying boss fights, but even it has a few damp squibs here and there. Take the Divine Dragon encounter, for instance. Visually, the Divine Dragon looks stellar, but the actual fight against it is really rather tame. From Software games traditionally tend to always have at least one gimmick boss fight, and in Sekiro, Divine Dragon is that fight. It's not a bad encounter, but it doesn't do justice to how intimidating the foe looks. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.